Welcome to PopCon. How would you feel like celebrating New Year's Eve every night? Well, millions of guests from around the world experience this very phenomenon for the better part of 19 years. And in their festivities, they most likely cross paths with my first guest of 2021. Hey there, can you, in your own words, introduce yourself?
Hi, first of all, happy 2021. I'm the first guest.
You are.
This is
Thank you
exciting.
so much.
Yeah. Well, I spent 19 years working on Pleasure Island, 18 of which I spent celebrating New Year's Eve every night.
Phew.
So when your guests finally see who I am, they're going to be blown away because I'm still in 1990.
Perfect. I can't wait to see you. Folks, you want to stick around and meet this extraordinary character in this, our pop conversation.
Pleasure Island is unlike any other island you've ever visited. This is an oasis of 7 nightclubs, restaurants, and stores. These aren't your average establishments. Welcome to clubbing Disney style.
This is the Adventures Club.
Here you're surrounded by authentic 1930s paraphernalia and are treated to unique experiences like a mask room. Down the street, there's the Zephyr Rock and Roller Drome, where you'll find live bands, food and drink, and a roller skating rink. Is this direct competition to Church Street Station?
No, I don't think Disney ever thinks about competing with anybody.
An army of workers is sprucing Pleasure Island up for tonight's extravaganza, but most of the public won't get to come to the island till mid-May. If Pleasure Island becomes a success, and Disney believes it will, you may see more of these complexes throughout the country. Wendy Chioji, News Center 2, Pleasure Island.
This is PopCon, a salute to all pop culture, but mostly the 80s. I'm your host, Victor, and what a better way to kick off 2021 than a story about New Year's every single night. Now, my special guest of this pop conversation is an extraordinary character actress and comedian, and she was instrumental in opening a resort destination and a pop culture experience in 1989. Please welcome my guest, Sheila Ward.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm hoping it's
2021.
I know.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Look at you. You don't look a day over 1990.
Well, you interrupted me. I was in the middle of one of my favorite episodes of Friends. It's a new one that just came on last week.
Wow. What's going on? What's this one called? The one that
where Ross and Rachel break up.
Wow. There was a number of those, wasn't there?
Yeah. Probably.
Thank you so much for being my first guest. This is a pop conversation, and we're just going to head right into it. Can you really just tell us in your own words, define it?
Define Pleasure Island?
Yeah.
I used to say when people said, what do you do for Disney? I work at a nighttime entertainment complex, back in the early 90s, and like in 1989, it was Disney After Dark. So it was more adult, but children were allowed in most of the clubs. And it was a place to spend your evenings.
You just described Pleasure Island very kind of clinical. After working there for so long, describe Pleasure Island. What was it really like?
Oh, wait. So by saying clinical, you're saying I was being very corporate.
You were, or at least you were being very professional about that answer. What would you describe Pleasure Island after being there for so long? Go ahead.
It was a blast. It was a place for people to go get drunk. It was, for performers, we walked a line and we got away with something things and comedy that you can't get away with now, but you couldn't get away with back in the day, right. In the parks. So we were edgy. We were the edgier, the darker side of Disney in a sense. Isn't Pleasure Island something? I mean, I should know all my Disney history. It's something from Peter Pan, isn't it?
Close.
Pleasure
Pinocchio.
Yeah. So,
and the boys were drinking and becoming asses of themselves. So yes.
Well, hello. But anyway, you said it. I mean, someone had some not sick and twisted, perverted. They had a very creative mind to think, okay, Pleasure Island is where you go and you act like an ass. So let's do it.
There? How'd you get this job? Why did you audition there?
Because a friend of mine, I was doing a show in Traverse City, Michigan, and she was picked to put this band together for the Zephyr Rock and Roller Drome on Pleasure Island. So I had moved to California and she was out there. So my second week in California, she set up for me to meet with an Imagineer, Dave David Fisher. So I met with him. He showed me the huge little like mock-up model of the Zephyr Rock and Roller Dome and all of what Pleasure Island was going to be, because it was just being built. And then I went to the Debbie Reynolds dance studio and sang 16 bars for Ronnie Rodriguez. Ooh. And then like my 5th week out in LA, they said they would move me and I would be the host, the Zephyr Rock and Roller Dome. And really long story short, because this is going to be 2 hours and you're going to have a lot of stuff.
A lot of edit. Long
story short, driving across the United States, they call me and say, we've offered you too much money. So sorry. And I'm like, well, I'm in Oklahoma, so you better figure something out. I'm like, I'm in Oklahoma. I've signed a contract. So then they call back and say, okay, you're going to learn the Zephyr Rock and Roller Dome and you're going to be a swing for the island. You'll work at the Adventures Club and the Comedy Warehouse.
Zephyr Rock and Roller Dome. What exactly was that?
XZFR 108.9 off your radio dial. I was the earthling friend of the alien band, the Time Pilots. And the Zephyr Rock and Roller Dome was a 3-story building. Mm-hmm. And the 2nd floor was a roller skating rink.
They were still trying to get that together, weren't they? They were trying to find their footing there, weren't they? Because roller skating and drinking.
Yes, and so it was XZFR. So it was spelled out like a radio station, XZFR, sure. But we called it the Zephyr Rock and Roller Dome because every building on Pleasure Island had a story.
Now, like you said, it changed a lot. There was no that roller skating rink didn't last, correct?
No, we opened in May of '89, and the roller skates were gone by April for sure because they gave them away on Let's Make a Deal. Remember when Let's Make a Deal?
Yes, that's another story, folks. Let's Make a Deal. That's another story.
Yeah. But I remember seeing like, or you can have what's behind door number 2. And it opened up and the wah, wah, and it was all the roller skates from the Zephyr Rock and Roller Dome. I'm not kidding.
I've got to find that. That is good stuff. So you drove across country. You obviously worked it out. They said you're going to do more roles. Now, you weren't working at Disneyland. So this was your first entry into Disney entertainment. And you're moved there. Here you are. They're still trying to find their footing with this nighttime entertainment place. What was Swing for the Island? What did that mean?
What?
You said you were a swing.
I was like, what?
I mean, I know
what?
You were swinging. You were swingers. So I know that you did the event. They asked you to go to the Adventures Club, but was that a swing to do both then? Was there another role in the Comedy Warehouse?
In my contract, it said Zephyr's Comedy Adventures Club. Those first few months, I would do Zappy Hour at the Zephyr Rock and Roller Dome. We did 2-for-1 drinks.
Okay, let's just go to this. Let's just go to these words with the Z. The X, the X. Alliteration, is that not what it's called? Something like that.
It worked for like 6 months.
And then all the.
But there's so many stories here. So I would go into work. I was the only performer, and this is before equity. Look at me talking like I'm whispering. I worked a 9-hour day. I got to work at 4:30, which, us performers, we're divas. We don't work.
You see me? 9. You get paid for 8 to work 3.5.
Yeah, exactly. Well, some stages even less. So I would clock in at 4:30. We didn't clock. We punched in 4:30. I would do Zappy Hour from 5 to 7. Then I was in 3 of the 5 band sets teaching the aliens about music. But then on Fridays, I would leave Zappy Hour and I would go do 3 or 4 shows at the Comedy Warehouse to swing that show. And that's when it was sketch comedy. Everything made fun of the Disney experience. So I didn't
experience any of those. I only experienced it when it was improv. So that's something that was also, I don't know how long that lasted, the sketch.
Yeah. Oh, that opened because I remember we'd sit in those Comedy Warehouse rehearsals with Michael Eisner sitting in watching every rehearsal to make sure that he'd be in his baseball hat, like 3 rows behind us and watching everything, almost like Lorne Michaels at Saturday Night Live. Yeah. So he'd watch the different sketches and be like, that gets cut. And we did a lot of things now I'm sure we wouldn't do, but
it was a different era, but it was a fun era. It was fun. And we're going to get to that. We've got to get to New Year's Eve, but I want to start with what's Adventures Club? You obviously got into that, and you got into that big time.
So then they moved me there full time because the alien band got taken out. So Zappy Hour went away. They took away, and that's when a lot of things started to change at Pleasure Island too. New Year's was about to happen all the time, and they took away.
First New Year's was 89 to 90, and that kind of just went on as a New Year's celebration. Was it after that these started to these changes took place?
Probably because they dropped the tickets, they gated the park.
Mm.
Dateline, Walt Disney World. The night of April 7th exploded with a new look for Pleasure Island, the nighttime hotspot of the Disney Kingdom.
Now every night is New Year's Eve at Pleasure Island.
That's right. Whether it's December 31st or July 1st, guests can count down to midnight every night with a New Year's street party celebration.
3, 2, 1. It's great. Fantastic. This is terrific. New Year's in April? I think it's marvelous.
This celebration kicked off with music from hot groups like Tone Loc, Expose, and Paul Revere and the Raiders. So now New Year's could be anytime.
I celebrate it every night of the year, so this is not uncommon for me.
Disney knows how to throw a party.
You can expect the unexpected. Anything can happen on a Pleasure Island night.
For music, dining, and dancing, Pleasure Island's the place to be. Yeah.
Well, and that's when they brought in Art Leavitt. And Art Leavitt was, I think, he made the biggest difference. It was his idea to bring in New Year's Eve every night. He had wacky, crazy, we had mud wrestling on the West End, like what became the West End stage. There was mud wrestling. They were doing anything.
Yeah, to draw.
Crazy. Out there was a shooter girl on a horse that went up and down the island.
I've got to
There
find
were
pictures of that.
There were barnyard animals in front of the neon armadillo that they finally pulled because either the roosters or someone started having.
Yeah, that. Fornicating. So that's
They
a
were
funny
fornicating
thing.
over at the neon.
The Neon Armadillo, but I can just see it, a country western bar and all this live farm animals. They were trying anything they possibly could.
Yeah.
So you're in the Adventurers Club now. Describe what that is.
The Adventurers Club is it's an explorers club. I know. What it started out being,
Yes.
or what it became.
That initial, because it was it 1939 every night or 1936?
37.
Yes, I want to know what it was like before, because when New Year's every night hit, was the Adventurers Club already there? Was it already the last night of 1937 every night?
Now you're saying something. We never played it. It wasn't the last. I mean, yes, when New Year's Eve started every night, it was
That's
just always
the change.
1937.
Got
It was whatever day we were on. It was 1937.
Understood. When New Year's Eve every night came, it was the last night of 1937 from then on, right?
Right. So we did.
Got it.
That would have been more like a Groundhog Day thing where every day had to play the same. And no, I wouldn't have lasted 18 and a half years there.
Right. Totally can understand that.
Yeah. So it was an explorers club. People thought it was a gentleman's club. People thought it was a British club. It was just an eccentric place for people to hang out. And these 8 characters every night had, traveled the world. And this was their private club that people would be allowed to come into.
Did it take time to catch on? Was there even fear of it closing and changing? Was it something tough to sell at first?
I think so. I mean, none of my relatives got it. They'd be like, we don't know what she's doing for a living. We don't get it.
They couldn't describe what you were doing, I'm sure. That would be difficult.
Yeah. And I mean, quite honestly, I remember a gal that I worked with, Carrie Long, myself, and Paula Pell, who went on to great fame and fortune. But Carrie Long and she was picked for the Adventurers Club, and we were staying at the Residence Inn off of International Drive. She'd come home every day because I was learning Zephyrs and I was learning music at the time,
Right.
and she was down at Adventurers Club. She'd be like, I don't know what this is. This is crazy. These people are whacked. I don't know what job I've said yes to. Oh my gosh. Because they thought too, the people who built Pleasure Island thought people were going to come into the Adventurers Club because this is what Disney guests did. You came in, you saw a show, and you left.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't expect people to sit there and want to sit there and stay there all night. So there were only 2 shows written for the library, and they thought people would circle in, come down, get their drink, go into the library, see the one show, leave, and be done. And people started sitting there and staying all night.
And to kind of ground everybody watching, there was the main salon. A lot of you as characters would roam that, interacting individually.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a couple of bits that were created for that room. The induction ceremony being the main one, correct?
Yeah.
And
For the main salon. And then we
treasure
had
room,
the puppets
the
on
mask room, and then the library.
Li-
And those were the main separate shows, right?
Mhm.
All right.
So the treasure room and the mask room. would be 10-minute vignettes or scenes, and the library would be roughly 20 minutes.
Okay.
The new membership inductions took 10 minutes, and we did those 3 times a night. But we didn't do an induction ceremony probably until 1990. That came in later when we started feeling like getting our bearings more and what this was going to be.
Well, share those changes from that first time you were in the Adventurers Club working to those big changes that may have come a year later. What was the biggest changes that happened in that state?
I mean, New Year's Eve affected it. We used to do confetti inside the club every night.
Oh my,
and that's
a cleanup
amazing.
Nightmare.
It was a cleanup nightmare, and that's why it went away, Victor. So thank you for bringing up the negative.
Sorry.
No,
I would have loved
budget cut. I'm pretty sure it was a budget cut. Yeah, because they were having to pull confetti out of all, because the artifacts had come in from everywhere. Joe Rohde, the Adventurers Club was Joe Rohde's
retired.
first. Yeah, and that was his first big thing, was building the Adventurers Club. And the masks, the artifacts had all come in. A lot of them were real things that he had brought back.
You may have played a role that evening, but you also had some other duties to do. Tell us a little bit about running off and having to be a puppet.
Oh, okay. Well,
you know,
first of all,
backstage.
When they first opened, before I got there, they had the Marcel the ape that walked around.
There's a lot of photos of that.
So the girls would do both the maid and the president, because there was only 7 roles to start.
Oh, okay.
The guys would switch characters 3 times. So, but yeah, so then depending on what character you were, Babylonia had to come to life on the wall, and Colonel Critchlow Suchbench had to come to life, and we were the ones who brought life into those puppets on the walls.
Were they just other rooms backstage? Just a room you went into? Were there crawl spaces? Were there?
I wouldn't call them rooms exactly.
I wonder. I didn't think they might be full on rooms.
Colonel's niche. We called it the Colonel's niche because we had props in there and things that you'd go in and kind of take a reprieve from the guest, maybe, or just you'd go in. There was a prop cabinet in there where we could grab stuff, and the Colonel was there. Babylonia was just stairs that you climbed to get up into that. And are we sharing magic and secrets that we're not supposed to share?
It doesn't exist anymore. We're okay.
You know what? You're so right. And guess what? I hate to tell your viewers this. It's never coming back.
Anyway. They were so hopeful, but we'll get to that.
And then the hardest one, the Beazle, the floating head of a genie. I never did. I never stuck my head in that little box. Blah, blah, blah. No. So I just can't imagine. Anyway, and then Arnie and Claude, the 2 masks in the mask room, the actors bringing those to life were right behind Arnie and Claude. I'm getting ice out of my mug because I'm thirsty.
No worries. I don't want you to be parched. Please keep hydrated. Guests were staying. People were getting it. They were liking it because there's no argument. The Adventurers Club became a staple, a something that everybody wanted to see. They wanted to stick around. They wanted to meet each of you. So let's talk about the fans. Were there the fans that thought Samantha Sterling was real, or at least interacted with you to the point that, oh my gosh, you are Samantha Sterling? Tell me about your adventures.
Yes. Yeah, there was tons of that. But the club would not have had the success that it did if it weren't for the fans. So I used to equate it, and in talking to you more now, the way I would describe Adventurers Club, if you ask that and cut and go back, the Adventurers Club was the most Disney nightclub at Pleasure Island.
Makes sense. The storytelling.
You could get a comedy club anywhere else. You could get a Mannequin's Dance Palace anywhere else. You could get a country western line dancing yeehaw place any place else. The Adventurers Club was Disney at its best for nightclubs. So
and it served hard liquor, so that made it even. Hey, it's a marriage made in heaven.
And there were fans, and and rightfully so. They probably helped us out a lot in a backwards weird way, but because they were fans, they would claim their spots in that main salon, and they would stay there all night. And this happens in any theater, any comedy, any whatever. Became Rocky Horror Picture Show at times when they shouted out the lines and ruined the jokes for us. And we would talk to them about it and be like, we love that you love us. Yeah. Thank you. But please stop ruining the joke for everybody else.
I was going to ask you how you handled it, because that's a fine line you want to cross with, like, I love you being here and you really help us, but it's our show and we've got to make it at first for everybody else,
Yeah. And then there were ones that showed up and they wanted to be that 9th character at the Adventurers Club. And we see that everywhere we go. You know what? and I don't want to pat myself on the back. This isn't, I don't know if it's much to be proud of, but I think people would know that I loved hecklers and I handled hecklers well. But there were nights for me personally that most not, dressed as a French maid, go ahead, play grab ass, whatever. But then there were other nights when I'm like, I'm not in the mood for this, and I'm not getting paid enough for you to be treating me this way and whatever. And the management was great at being like, if someone gets out of line or whatever, you walk off the floor and you let management handle it. So, I remember little bits of that.
Yeah.
I mean, there were things I remember seeing some guy get tased at the bottom of the stairs, but he came in drunk from somewhere else,
But knowing you, and I saw you perform, you probably took that and you made it a bit. Like you could take the distraction. You could say, I know what's going on and I'm going to turn that around. I saw you perform so much. Hecklers, that's what makes you an expert too. Everyone out there, Sheila, you can take whatever happens, the situation you're in, and you keep it rolling. You can make it light. So that's excellent. But I bet you found some great material.
Well, I'll tell you though, I learned that at the Adventures Club. If anyone ever applauds me, pats me on the back, says what talent set you have, it's like, well, I spent 19 years on Pleasure Island, and you honed some chops there.
Sure
and
did.
Another thing to add into that, we were the one club that started doing conventions. We did conventions
It lent itself to that very easily. Those
it was
characters.
that's one reason I wish they'd build another one, it was a perfect venue for a convention of 200 or less. Would I love to see an Adventures Club again? Yes, because it was very Disney. I was hoping put the Adventures Club, move it to Animal Kingdom outside where the Rainforest Cafe is. It's perfect. The reason I would think it wouldn't be this, it would never be the same, is not Disney's fault. It's the fact that comedy has changed so much that there's always going to be one person that gets offended, and then you can't do that joke, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that, and when you're hiring 8 improvisers on every night, it just loses some of that of what it's supposed to be when you can't do what you want to do.
It's like the genie in a bottle thing where it captured a moment in time. Like you said, things have changed, comedy has changed. The inability to do what you did before is there is some things that just don't fly, sadly, but it was a product of that 89, mostly 90s. It's a 90s thing, and it was very successful. And I think that even with your risque humor that happened, it found a place, and there's so many people out there that understand it and can take that knock. Today, if you did it again, it wouldn't capture the same essence. So that is
right.
It does make you a pop culture icon, even if it's local, even if it was a short amount of time that you were pop culture. Do you know that Adventures Club or Pleasure Island, do you know its place in pop culture? Like, do you think of it and go, yeah, it's pop culture. It was pop culture at least. Do you have any reference of that?
Oh, well, South Park did.
I was so glad you knew it. Yes.
Yes. South Park did something on us.
Yeah.
So I guess that's pretty important.
I saw the South Park episode, not really a family concept and didn't maybe have the mission that the Adventures Club did, but it was so obviously the Adventures Club. Super Adventures Club, it was called.
Yeah.
And I'll show a picture for everyone on the view, but the Super Adventures Club didn't have the same mission you did, but it was so obviously a lift. It was like, that's amazing. What a little thing. But to know that did live on, and it has been referenced in something like South Park. The other one was The Simpsons. Did you ever see the episode where go to Parents Island and it's New Year's Eve every few minutes?
No.
Yeah. So they go to Itchy and Scratchy Land, and Marge and Homer go to Parents Island, and it looks just like it, even the arched entrance, but it's New Year's Eve every few minutes. So
wow.
I said to myself, those are when you know that, whether or not it'll live on, hundreds of years down the line, people go Pleasure Island. There is the pop culture reference is there, and it's something to be proud of too.
Well, thank you. I taught traditions for the Walt Disney Company. And after teaching it for cast members, I taught it for years for Disney Institute. And I remember teaching a class over at Disney University. And it was like a Disney's approach to people management or Disney's approach to leadership skills. And it had all different corporations within this class. And I remember on a break, these two men sitting at a table, and I'm going to forget the name of the club, but you'll probably know it. And they said, hey, so you worked at the Adventurers Club? And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, we've been coming there a lot, and we've actually pretty much stolen all of the ideas. And we're building a club in New York City based on the Adventurers Club.
Wow.
And yeah, and these men totally flat out said, yeah, we're pretty much stealing everything. And they had, I don't know if they had
You're
the bar
flattered,
sticker.
and you're also like,
Yeah, I was like, are you
Wait.
allowed to do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, for those, I think traditions, when you said that you taught to cast members, that's orientation, correct?
Yes.
Or
I'm
the new
sorry.
cast.
It's an orientation class that every cast member goes through on the first day of employment. And a lot of other companies benchmark with the Walt Disney Company
Got it.
to learn how they train so many thousands of cast members all the time.
And steal ideas, apparently.
They had a butler, they had a maid, they had a statue in the middle of the room. And I'm going to send you a picture of me in the original French maid's outfit that you can see almost my lady parts.
Okay, we want to see that. So go ahead and send that.
So it's like, oh my gosh, she's not wearing anything. And that's what we wore almost the first entire year.
But the uniqueness about the maid was all the performers got to pick their own name.
Yeah, that was the only one out of all of them.
So what was your name?
I was Annelle the French maid, and Annelle is my mom's name.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. That's how. Okay. Did your mom come and visit and just love it because it was you, or did she get it?
My mom's very supportive, but I think she'd sit there like, what in the world
is going on?
And she liked it more when I think the music, because Samantha had her own cabaret, and the French maid had her own sing-along at night, which didn't start out that way. It started out as a Fingers Zambezi Takes Request, and Fingers was a spirit that inhabited the Wurlitzer in the library. And that was just something we needed shows to fill up time because people were staying until 1 a.m. Got Away with Murder with our cabaret show. And then the French maid show too. That was our own. We got to pick our songs, and the director had to approve of them, but we got to do pretty much our own thing in there. So
you did cross the line a lot. Was there ever a time that anyone crossed the line and you remember a time like, whoops, we really did that far. We went far over the line. You're like, get a cocktail.
Well,
you're like, I have many, many, many stories.
Wait.
No worries. I'll cut.
It's funny. In the moment, I mean, there's a few times in the moment when I was like, oh my gosh, you did not just go there. Did you just go there?
I went there.
Oh my gosh, we did this every night. We got away with these jokes every night and never got in trouble for it. Never.
Did you ever have anyone come down and say, that was so hysterical, don't do that one again?
I never did anything wrong, Victor. I'm trying to think really quick. The things we got away with. I remember, and I'll use his name, and I think he'll be fine with it because he is a big old pop icon, pop culture freak. Graham Murphy is Hathaway Brown, and Hathaway Brown was the swarthy, he would make out with anything character, right? And he got up, and I was Samantha Sterling, and we were doing a very typical Disney thing where let's do a competition. Let's divide the room down the side. This is the A side and this is the B side. And let's see who sings louder. So Hathaway, come up here and you go first, and you lead the A side. So he gets up, does a good solid 3 minutes, I think, of total double entendre of you're the A's. Be proud of the A's. Be proud of your anus. Grab a hold of your anus. And we're all just like acting like this is a normal thing.
Right.
And we're just staring at the stage and like, yep. So then I think it was Tim Goodwin came up as Otis, and he's like, all right, then you're the B's. And I could, and they'll correct me if they ever watch your YouTube, and they'll say, no, it was me who did it. And that one did it, whatever. But then it became, you're the B's, so grab a hold of your B-ness. And when the B-ness and the anus come together.
Oh, it still works.
It still worked. But what worked about it was the innocence. And I'm telling you, those two men, whoever first did it, I know Graham Murphy definitely was a part of the first time. It was the best because they played it so innocently and exactly the way double entendre should be played. But you know what? They never told us to stop doing it. We did that till the last week we were open. So no one ever told us not to.
Good. That's part of the success. And that's part of why I think everybody found it so refreshing.
I mean, the New Year's thing was great around 2000 when we were turning over to 2000. But in the middle of that chunk was probably because we started hearing the rumors early on about all of Pleasure Island. After 9/11, the dancers went away. And the dancers were the New Year's Eve show every night. You know,
Yeah.
they're the ones who danced their asses off. I go back now and see old New Year's Eve shows.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, their dancing was so intense. Their costumes were so risque.
Yeah, they were. And, so New Year's Eve, we should spend a little time on that. It is the new year. New Year's Eve was huge. That was so successful. How did you equate its success? Did you just go, this is mind blowing? You had confetti you celebrated in each club. It was celebrated with a major street party where suddenly Stillwalkers and girls dressed as nurses with shots were out and about everywhere. But you're right. There were those dancers. It was a countdown. And at one point, the Adventurers Club characters had a part of that show. Weren't they up there for a few
Perkins
years?
was in that show with the old gramophone and they took on different themes. Actually, I mean, I had a blast doing that show, but my favorite one was the very first one we did. And it was just an elongated rhythm nation that the dancers did.
Yeah.
And they started on the tops of the buildings of Pleasure Island and marched up the street. But then some of the girls were getting grabbed and touched. So they were like, okay, we're going to can that. And I think that's just because it was I used to say people would always, their favorite Samantha was their first Samantha.
Makes
their
total
favorite
sense.
Butler was the first Butler they saw.
Isn't your first time always memorable?
Oh, golly. Well,
maybe not always.
but the first New Year's Eve show was my favorite New Year's Eve show. So so when the dancers went away, the New Year's Eve thing had to change again because we didn't have the big dance show anymore. So the DJs had to take over and the lights and the lasers or the fireworks or whatever. So
Disney is making some major changes to one of its most popular attractions.
Pleasure Island will be gutted during the next 3 years. The work begins in just a matter of days.
Yeah, Chopper 2 shows how it looks now on the waterfront near Cirque du Soleil and the AMC theaters. But after the makeover, expect a different view.
It's closed. It's over. It's gone. How did you feel? Not when you were told, when you were done that last night.
you know what? I could still get emotional about it being gone. But the last week, and let me just say, I always tell people this, the thing that I loved was Kevin Lansbury was the vice president of Pleasure Island and what became Downtown Disney. He gave us 3 months. And a lot of times when things close at Disney, especially shows with actors in them, like the dancers, they were told that night, you're done. And they got 2 weeks pay and they were gone. We never saw them. We were given 3 months, which was such a blessing, so great. It was a gift to all of us. And those last 3 months were the most, I just got chills, were the most amazing. That last week was packed. People flew in that had been fans of the club for years because the crowds were so big. Now, you know, we weren't supposed to be anachronistic. They set up a video screen in the main salon.
So everyone
they had a huge like canvas type screen outside of the club for guests that couldn't get in because of the capacity. The last week was amazing. And that last night was all of us like it was yesterday. We left, we kungalooshed the last kungaloosh. The main salon was so packed. We went out in a single file line and we had choreographed it and thought it through. We're like, we'll exit, we'll go up the stairs, we'll go out and leave outside.
Yeah.
True story, my hand to God. This is probably another reason we closed. So it's packed, it's packed, it's packed. We're crying. We're like, oh, we're waving it. Kungaloosh. We come out, we exit the club, we go down, and there was a stairwell between us and what became the BET soundstage. We're leaving. We go up. There is a guest. Someone's holding her ponytail back, and she is vomiting by the step. And we're like, Kungaloosh, what clothes?
Right to the end, Sheila. Right to the end. It was never changed. It was exactly what it should have been. It was exactly what you'd expect.
It was the best. We're like, you're why we're closing. That wasn't it, but yeah, it was. Wow. But the last week was amazing. What was really cool was that we closed, and I'm going to get this wrong, but the next night or the following week. Mm-hmm. We had our first gay wedding reception from two fans that had booked the club a year in advance for their wedding reception.
Oh, that is so great.
It was so crazy great that we got to come back the following week and do that for them. And then another client, and I don't know, and I'm going to see them this week because they still come to Disney and they still know. This was a client. He owns an insurance company here in town, and he knows they were the last ones to have the Adventurers Club.
So when was the last time you wore the costume? Because I know there's been reunions, there's been conventions. When was the last time you put on one of those?
Well, Pamelia, we wear them for the marathons.
Marathon. I've seen pictures of you at the marathon. I have some photos here to put in our
show. So I'm
show.
happy to announce to all of the people, I still fit in all three outfits. I'm just saying.
You know, you also, if people go to Disney Springs, you are found in some photographs. So there is a couple of Easter eggs there. Do you know them?
Yeah. At the Hangar Bar. Yes.
Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar. You are photos of some of the Adventurers Club characters are photographed there in the opening of that bar, which is nice.
Yes.
You know, more talking to you this time, Sheila. I have known you for years. I have seen you perform in so many ways. And talking to you now made me realize even more than I already knew that the place was special, that the place had fans, that it didn't last that long without them. And you did such a marvelous job, all of you. And what a fun time. And you do live on in pop culture references. You were a product of the time that still is remembered. And it's funny, I think about the internet today, social media and young people, they will be uncovering the remnants of the Adventurers Club for decades to come. And when you think about the way that people do now, they're going to find those YouTube videos. They're going to find the content and go, what was this? This was once what? So you'll be discovered over and over and over again. And I think that's a very special thing to think about.
Well, thank you very much. That's very kind. I don't know if we're that important, but
well, you never know this day and age. There's a niche for everyone, isn't there?
Well, and you know, you said it too, social media. That's why I feel like we started gaining more traction towards the end.
Correct, because it was in its infancy in 2007. Going to Pleasure Island was a huge coming of age. I spent my 21st birthday there, Sheila, and it is a night I still remember vividly just because of everything about it. It was unforgettable. But there was a point.
Let's interview Victor now about his
that'll be for another story. That's the extras you can get later on another video.
Okay.
So, but you just mentioned how the signs were coming, and yeah, it closed in 2008. Pleasure Island closed in 2008. I went in those last couple months, and although I would go on occasion in those last years, it had not been its heyday for me anyway. But it did feel different, and I bet it felt different. Mostly for you and the performers.
I always equated it. I tell my relatives that didn't get it, I'm like, we're like a small Star Wars fan, but you know, people that love Star Wars, people that love Star Trek, people that loved this gathering place.
They were just as enthusiastic. They were just as passionate.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. We climbed the highest mountain.
We climbed the highest mountain.
Just to get a better view.
Just to get a better view.
We plumbed the deepest ocean.
We plumbed the deepest ocean.
Because we're daring through and through.
Because we're daring through and through.
We crossed the scorching desert.
We crossed the scorching desert.
Martini in our hand.
Martini in our hand.
We ski the polar ice cap.
We ski the polar ice caps.
In tuxedo looking grand.
In tuxedo looking grand.
We are reckless, brave, and loyal.
We are reckless, brave, and loyal.
And valiant to the end.
And valiant to the end.
If you come in here a stranger.
If you come in here a stranger.
You will exit as a friend.
You will exit as a friend. Sheila, you are a friend to me. You are a friend to, oh my goodness, Congaloosh.
Got it with the club salute, Victor.
I thank you so much for sharing that, for saying that, making it end like this too. I really appreciate your time. I hope you had a good time.
I had a great time. Thank you for having me. I'm just fortunate enough to know you and be a friend of yours, because I will shout out to anyone who sees this, and I hope a lot of people do. I wouldn't have been the performer that I was if it weren't for all the people that were around me. And we had some amazing cast members that came through the Adventurers Club. So I send love out to all of them as well as to you, and wish you all the best with this pop culture thing. This is so cool.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you can tell how delightful this conversation was, and there was so much left on the cutting room floor. Do you have any memories of Pleasure Island or the Adventurers Club? Let me know in the comments, and maybe we can get Sheila back to share many more adventures.
All right, everyone out there, if you have not subscribed to PopCon, you do that right now. All right, you can comment, you can like, do whatever you have to do, but right now, subscribe to PopCon.